Good afternoon everyone, or morning, or whenever you're watching this, and we're back today having a look at the adjustment layers and what each one of these does in particular. The first lot are solid color gradient pattern. I don't really use these that much. You can create a solid color fill, which literally lets you create a layer full of color, but there's a million ways you can do this anyway. But I guess the good thing about this is you can dynamically change it, although like with most layers you can just shift the hue anyway. So this is one of about 15 ways in the program to make a color, kind of just a layer of flat color. Gradient is what it says. Again, I would probably apply this directly over a layer if I was going to do it, so I don't really use this that much, because what I would usually do, again, with these first three, there's a way to do this, and you would just go and create a new layer. With the gradient, I would just go to the gradient tool, select whatever gradient I want to use, and then just draw it. And then that would be that, really. You know, you can change the overlay mode and whatever else. But that's how I would do that. In a similar way, if you hit Shift Backspace, you can fill a layer. In this case, we're going to fill the whole canvas because we have layer selected, and you can fill the canvas with a color, which is what we've just seen. You can fill the canvas with a pattern, which is the other adjustment layer, which we just saw as well. 50% grey, which is actually quite useful, as I'll show you later on, or the foreground or background color, which are these two. So, and then you can even change the way you add it, so if you want to add it as an overlay. So that's really useful. So Shift Backspace. If you do Alt Backspace, you will just fill with whatever the color is here. So that's quite useful to know as well. So what I would usually do is hit Make a New Layer, or you can hit Control Shift Alt N, and we've got one there, and then just hit Alt Backspace. If I want it white, you can hit Control I, which inverts the color of your layer, which is also quite useful. So just little tricks I'm trying to show you, like slowly but surely, to kind of brightness and contrast. I'm going to bring all of these work with the properties panel. I'm going to try break out the properties panel here, bring it in. Okay, here we go. So brightness and contrast is quite simple. You have two. You have the overall brightness. As you see, if we bring this down, we start to get like the artifacting. Fortunately, we can't see that at the current level of brightness, so it doesn't really bother me. The contrast will increase the contrast in the colors. If you want a flatter image, you bring it down left, and more contrasty image, obviously, bring it right. I very rarely use brightness and contrast because I think it's way too limited. What I would do usually, in a similar sense, exposure brings the brightness of your image up and down, and you can offset it, and the gamma kind of is just the saturation almost of the colors. But again, these two I very rarely use because I'm going to show you a better way to do them, and that is with either levels or curves. Now levels and curves do pretty much the same thing. Once you get used to using curves, I don't think you'll ever use anything else, once you understand what this is. So down here you have the dark point, so this is like the blackest point of your image. By dragging this, we can make the image darker. So what we're doing is essentially darkening the darkest areas, which is giving us more saturation. On the opposite end of the spectrum, you can brighten the brights. So this is in effect doing what the contrast slider does. But the difference is, at the moment it's linear, which means that the effect is being applied almost in a straight line. But say I want to like darken the darks but brighten the brights, I can do both of those things and increase the contrast that way. So that's really powerful, and sometimes you might even want to lift the whites, so you don't want the blacks to be like too black, so you can like lift the black point. You might not want the whites to be too white. You might bring this down to give your image like a kind of flatter look. So if we have a look before and after, so we've actually brought down the brightness of the whole image and the colors as well, but flattened it as well. And the other thing with this is you can go from the RGB to the red channel Maybe you want to bring the reds down, and then this is literally taking the reds out of all the bright areas, so which will leave us with blue and green, which makes this cyan color, and then we can lift the reds here. So this is adding reds to like the darker areas. So again, before and after. So we've really like boosted the reds in here, which is good because like the whole image is made of pinks and reds. What I like to do sometimes bring the blues down, which gives the image like a bit of a yellow tint, and then lift the blues as well slightly. But maybe not so much relevant in this one because we don't really want to mess with the whites. But just so you're aware, like the curves are literally the one I would get to grips with the most. You can do fancy things like draw custom curves, but I wouldn't recommend that because you end up with like weird results. You can also select auto, which Photoshop will try and like work it all out by itself, but I wouldn't do that really. Here we have levels, and levels works in pretty much the same way as curves. You have this is like bringing them together, like I showed you earlier, in a linear fashion, and this is almost the midpoint between the two. So if you want more of a curve this way or towards the blacks or the whites, you can do that. You have the output level, which is the output clipping level of your image brightness, and then again you can like lift the reds, mess with the reds. So yeah, there's plenty of options in there too, and again, like if I like this but I want to just tone it down, I can do that. I can maybe just overlay or soft light this effect just to give, again, different ways in which it will actually blend. So if you look, that's actually quite nice what it's done there. It's added like a bit of a vintage feel. So just by messing about with the levels and the curves, you can get some interesting results. So these are the two I would probably recommend, and if we put those in combination, recommend getting with the most. Vibrance is really cool. So saturation will boost like the colors in your image. The vibrance actually boosts the colors in the desaturated areas. So it's actually a really subtle effect, but really good for making your image pop, because if you increase your saturation, everything just goes haywire. But by boosting the vibrance by itself, you get this really subtle strengthening of the color, which I tend to use quite a lot actually. Down here, I'm not going to show you this stuff today, but basically, no, it's like the way in which your adjustment layer is applied. We'll do that another day. Hue saturation, probably my most used effect. The hue, you can change the whole feel of something just by shifting all the colors to one way. So when Sony released the remixers for roses, they literally did this. And that's what a lot of artists do with their artwork. They literally just color shift it, maybe boost it a bit. But the real power in this effect, and you can also darken and lighten. I wouldn't do that, to be honest. You can also colorize. So if I boost this, and I can colorize the artwork in just one color if I want, which is kind of cool. Again, you can then like maybe overlay or multiply it, and so this is just like then adding like multiplying all that pink. So like doubling the darkness of everything, but through the pink. But the power in this filter is actually, if I reset it, is you can just shift, so select like the reds, and so here you have the range of the reds. So this is, even though I'm selecting reds, I can like expand this area, and so now when I move the shift, this is just going to move like the colors within this spectrum, and as you go towards the fall off of this area, the effects that we're doing is going to be lessened to the point where everything outside of this slider is not being affected. So what we're doing here is we're mainly moving like the pinks around, but if you look at the tones in her face, which are more like orange and yellow, they're staying the same. So this is a better way to work, I feel, because it gives you more control. See, now we're just moving the reds, so obviously there's a lot of red in this picture. But what we've done now, as opposed to before, is we've moved all the reds towards purple, but we've kept the skin tones almost, like not exactly, but almost, because they'll fall somewhere between the slider. But we've not changed them as radically as we would have if we just applied this. I'm going to apply another filter and just move the saturation just to show you. So what did I do here? a look at the reds. So minus 57. So if I come in here and do a minus 57. So let's compare that to that. So as you can see, there's a big difference in what I've done here. I've moved all the skin towards purple. It looks foul. Here we've kept everything the same. So that's really powerful, and obviously you can do that with all the color ranges. So very, very cool. Hue saturation and level is probably my most used effects. Color balance is great. Again, we're going to go a bit longer than the usual lesson today. I hope that's all right. I'm just showing you. So this, you get to move your darks, your lights, and your shadows into different ways. This is a filter I will usually add to my piece like right at the end if I'm not sure about the color, because you can quickly go from having something like this to, oh, I've actually moved the color ranges around, and those are just the midtones. The highlights I probably won't want to change too much because it's a very bright image, so I'll end up getting effects that I don't want, but I might want to go into the shadows then, and then like I've got a lot of purple here, so maybe move like some stuff towards green a bit and more towards probably red, not red, sorry, yellow. So again, you know, like we've kind of cancelled out what we did in the midtones, but together those two things have really boosted like the vibrance of everything. And if I wanted to radically change the color, the look of the color, I would just move these sliders like towards the far ends, and then you would see like a way bigger difference, you know. So it kind of works like hue saturation as well. And again, just remember with all these, you can like dial it down with the opacity. Okay, moving on. Black and white does exactly what it says on the tin. If you've watched the earlier tutorials, you saw me use this. And this lets you select the various areas, color areas of your picture and move them towards darker or lighter tones. And this is the best way for me to create, like, if you want to change your image to black and white, to have like a lot of control over like what areas are dark, what areas are light, and you can even mask some of these in and out, but and sometimes I even just like overlay this, and it just adds like a really nice contrast to the image. Again, a different look, but this will also boost the whites, as you can see, so kind of a two-edged sword, so be careful how you use it. Photo filter, I don't use so much. Channel filter, not so much either. Color lookup is really interesting. So a color lookup table is a lesson in itself. I recommend doing some research on this, because what these are color presets, and they're basically in the same way we've been manipulating colors like on a one by one level, like just the lights and the darks with the color balance or the hue saturations. We've been working with color ranges. Color lookup tables are presets that will essentially have like different looks built in. So like maybe all the oranges will be moved to purple. Maybe, as you can see, these are just some of the stock defaults that come with Photoshop, and there's loads out there you can get. And look how radically they're changing the well, that's not a great look, the look of this image. This one not so much, but like especially the Kodak, and what they're trying to do is actually emulate the look that these cameras would give, in this case like the Kodak cameras, but like the Fuji ones, and so that's essentially what they're trying to do. They're trying to recreate looks from different things, different cameras, and so that's how you might like get the look of an old film camera, for example. Of course, afterwards you'd have to go and add grain, but as you can see again, like just this is how radically this has changed my image. And definitely lookup tables are like massive, honestly, especially if you get some nice ones, like you get your favorites and you can just throw them on top of everything, keep your work looking consistent. Highly recommend looking into those. Last but not least, we've got like Invert, which will literally flip every color into the inverse range, so white will become black and everywhere in between. I don't really use that as an adjustment layer. Usually I would want to do that to a layer, in which case you can select it and do Command I or Control I, depending on if you're on PC or Mac, which is what we did with the black layer earlier, just Control or Command I. And as we come down here, threshold adds this almost cartoon effect It's not one I ever use, if I'm honest. So I guess if you wanted to get a degraded look, but I think there's better ways to do it. So I very rarely, in fact, I've never used that plugin. Now the last one I'm going to show you is Gradient Map, which is probably one of my favorites in the program. What this will do is colorize your artwork from the blacks to the lights. Now in this case we've got, if you invert it, it would be light to black. In this case we've got a really simple black gradient, right? Black to white gradient. So all the whites are being pushed to white, all the darks are being pushed to black, which is what we've got here. If we bring the black point down, we'll have like the darker image. So now more of the colors are being pushed to black. As you can see, that's a really nice way to control like how the black and white work. So usually I will use this in conjunction with the black and white here to create a nice image. But what you can do is maybe you want like the blacks to be more towards slightly like tinted. So what we might do is, I wonder if I've got, yeah, so this might be an example. So as you can see here, I've got like the whites moving towards yellow, and I've got the darks here, but then we've got like the midtones in green, and it just allows you to kind of customize. Maybe you want like the darker parts here to start glowing a bit, so we could like move those towards maybe a purple, and it's one of the only ways I know to really customize. And this is like the how they interpolate between these two stops here, and you can just select these and move them around. If you want to add a new one, just click in there, and obviously that would be garish, but just a really cool way to colorize your artwork, and especially once you've got a few nice gradients made. These gradients are more made towards styling rather than color mapping, but you can see how something like this would, it's given it like almost like a fiery look. So I use this gradient for a lot of things, but once you've created a few nice gradients, and again, you can overlay these, whatever, but I kind of like the way it is here. And then once you've brought it up, you can kind of tweak it. So if you want the light parts, maybe we even want it to be like really hot in the white areas, so we just bring that towards white, and so on and so forth. Maybe just bring it down. So now it looks like it's on fire. So again, the last one I'll show you today are gradient maps. So that's it. Probably a bit longer than most of the other lessons, but there's a lot to get through in the adjustment layers, and definitely just go and start playing with them. And they're so powerful because, like I say, you can stack them, you can fade them, and more importantly, you can turn them off if you are not sure about the look that you want. So thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you in the next lesson. Have a good one.